Welcome everybody to a new video here on the Coquitam River. This spot I've walked past a couple dozen times, never thought anything of it. Came this one morning and saw the light crossing the rocks in the water and it was just dancing, so I knew I had to paint it. So you see here I'm laying it in. My composition is a little bit of landmass on the right, a little bit of landmass on top, and the rest is just rocks and water because it was just sparkling and gleaming. The whole time I was there, it was amazing. And all I'm doing right now is just sketching in the distance rocks, kind of the main rocks that I want in it. And the rest I'll just fake them as time goes on. But I'm just trying to get an angular pattern there, getting, wide at the left, progressing narrower to the right, so it tapers you into that one rock. But we'll see what we can do with the water as well. And here I'm just laying in the blues that I see on those rocks, because that morning the tops of those rocks were just an amazing blue. So I knew I had to go get those in first. And they are a dirty blue, so I will punch it up a little bit later on. And just throwing in a nice warm green on the right-hand side landmass with some transparent red oxide for the shadows there. It was an interesting morning. You have cool shadow, cool light, warm shadows. So that's the way it kind of turned out. And laying in the darks for the landmass in the back, and then also the trees in the back. And yeah, that's probably too dark of a value. You can see I'm starting bringing it up a little bit. But I start off darks just to create shadows first, I guess, in a sense. And that's, a typical way of working in oils too, is dark to light. And then I created the top mass of the bank there in the greens. And I'll work on it a little bit further, but now I'm going to start working on the water. And you can see I added a dab to the surface of the panel before I started placing the rest, and that was just more of a test. I do a lot of testing with my mixtures. I probably end up mixing more than I do painting, because if you can't get the right value and temperature down, why would you paint with it? So I test it, mix, test again until I like it, and then when I like it I put it down. And later on you can change your mind and fix it or correct it. So you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and that's what painting is. And I see some beautiful crisscross angular patterns in the water. You'll see me start building them up here. And this is what I see there with the green. And the way I'd establish where I see this green is I don't stare at the water, right? I look at, say, the landmass on the right, and then I'll glance at the water and I'll notice where the green is and I'll paint it. I've been doing this a lot lately, and I'm finding it really helps me understand what colors I see. If I look at something for too long, it just turns into a kind of colorish neutral tone gray, and it doesn't really do anybody much good, let alone your painting. So there's a little bit of darker, warmer green that I see in the water, probably in the areas that are a little more still. And here I am building up the dark zigzags that I see, and that's what really intrigued me. It had a lot of motion in this water. It just wasn't running water or stale or stagnant water. It was moving quite a bit, and these patterns emerged. And I tried to capture what I saw, and it changed every moment, but I tried to maintain what I had. And a little bit darker down below, not only because it's a little more shadow in that area, but because it also helps seat the painting. Even if it wasn't a dark value down there, I'd probably darken it in comparison to the rest of the painting, just so you have a gradation from dark at the bottom to light through the middle. And I'm putting some of that color within the greens as well, the midground. I'm just trying to feather everything, keep everything soft. The worst thing you can do at the beginning of the painting is make everything nice and tight. You just get into a trap of trying to get everything tight, and it doesn't work out very well. I've been there. And so I keep everything loose as much as I can. And now I'm working into the rocks. At that time I saw some light kissing that rock. It's different in the reference photo, of course. But this is where I saw the lights in those rocks. And so that's where I'm just placing it down. I'm not spending a lot of time on each rock themselves because they have to be built up. I'm not going to render one rock completely, then move on to the next rock and next rock. I want to capture that time of day. Remember, I got an hour and a half, 2 hours max here. Even after an hour, this light changes dramatically, right? So I have to get those rocks in. I got to capture that essence at the time that I have, and I'm not going to sit on one rock and do that. I'm going to move and bounce, and everywhere I go, I'm going to make a change. And here I'm putting in the shadows of the rocks, trying to establish them, looking at where I want to be. Here I put down a little bit of sun kiss on the top. And I remix. I put a little bit of cooler sun on the other side as reflected light. Where am I here? And rock. Notice that I hesitate before putting down strokes. It's because I'm looking where I want to put that stroke. I'm just not going to dab something on there, because we have a tendency to dab things in pattern, and that's annoying. Speaking of patterns, though, those three rocks there right in the middle that I'm painting, they look like they go dot dot dot, but at least the bottom two are closer together than it is to the next one. So I always try to make a concerted effort whenever I'm painting to make sure where I'm putting my brush is where I actually want to put it. And now just putting in some shadow rocks. Rocks that don't really matter, but are there. A little bit of warmer value as well. And they're not really going to be a star. They're just going to be there to guide the viewer through. And you can see I put a light value on those rocks as well. And chances are those are the only two values I'm going to put on those rocks. Why? Because they're not as important as the rest. And I'm starting putting this tree at the background there. How it swoops up. A lot of these trees along this river, right? Most rivers, they travel from the bank over the water and up. And that's how I'm trying to capture them. And it's quite random throughout. But if I hadn't laid that in that background, I wouldn't really have to be able to put down those trees. It'd be a lot difficult to put the background in after I have the trees. And so what I did there is I lightened the distant trees, and now I'm putting in highlights on those trees that are coming out of the bank, as I saw them at that time. And then it might change as I move on. Sometimes the sun comes around and starts kissing the foreground or the background or a tree a little bit different way, so I'll add it in. And it's not chasing the light, it's just adding a essence of the light at that time that helps the painting shine more, right? Now you can see the sun starting to come on my my panel here. I will adjust a little bit later, but it will get quite intense. My apologies. And here I'm just putting in more values within that grassy area. So I had my darks in that grass, and now I'm putting some of the lights within that grass, trying to get a variety of texture, and I'm swooping that landmass into the water, right? So, bring your your background into your foreground and your foreground into your background kind of thing, right? Just helps create a more cohesive painting instead of everything looking like it's on top of each other. And putting in the shadows, now working on the rocks again, putting in the reflections of the rocks. A simple light green value, and they stroke it down, and that's pretty much all you need. Now you have reflections of those rocks. You don't have to spend countless minutes worrying about reflections. Just a quick swoop, but you got to make sure your value and temperature is correct. And a little bit of adjustment, keeping the rocks soft, even though the rocks generally are hard. The rocks that I'd find not important, I try to keep the edges soft. And now I'm pretty much putting in where the rock touches the water. So instantly you have that water line, and so now the reflection looks more like a reflection. And I'm putting it on those smaller rocks down below, working my way through. And I just dance from one part of the painting to the next part of the painting to the next part of the painting. My whole goal here was to get the essence of the water at the time, which was just mesmerizing. And I was frustrated throughout, and in the end I eventually got it due to one technique alone, which is more near the end of the video. So I'll make sure I'll point it out to you. Right now I'm just putting more of the highlights on the water, so I have all the darks established, which indicate the underneath of the water. So now I'm putting on the lights, which isn't the sparkle of the water, but it's more the top of the water. The sparkles is what I find the most fascinating with water. But you got to build up the layers. If you don't, you're not going to have an impressionistic view or a realistic view interpretation of the surface of the water. And so adding a little bit of cool greens, maybe a little viridian that's been grayed down within that, get another sense of depth within there. And I'm bringing in some, what am I bringing? I'm just sort of a little bit of lightening of those shadows, or the reflections of the rocks. Again, now I got to bring on my rigger brush, and I start to add a small tree, or not a tree, just a brush that was on that side edge. And what that is doing, is bringing that foreground of that landmass over top of those rocks, giving a further sense of depth, right? You've always got to think about a sense of depth in a painting, as far as I'm concerned. And putting those grasses in the back plane, and a little bit of sense of light in the back, but it's not overpowering, right? It's light for that area, but it's not as light as the rocks, so I don't have anything competing. So it gives a sense. And here I'm putting in some lights at the grasses with my rigger, some dots and dashes, little groups, small groups, overlapping groups, here and there, trying to keep it random. Random is the key. If you put too much repetitive strokes, it kind of starts looking like a fence. And now I do the fun stuff, building up the water sparkles and the movement of the water. And this is like a 3 or 4 in a value scale of a blue, so it's the shadows of the ripples more than anything. And the ripples of water capture not only the sky, but the shadow within the water, and then also the highlight of the light that's hitting it. So there's kind of 3 steps to ripples, and this is the first step. This is the shadows of the ripples, capturing the sky more or less. And I'm just bringing in randomly here and there where I think I see it. And usually, it touches the sides of the rocks. It follows the movement of the water. So if the movement of the water is to the right, the stroke will follow to the right. If you see a squiggle and it drops down to the left, that's how you should draw it, right? Get your impression of it. Now moving into some darker darks within that water, trying to establish some shadows, deep shadows in the rocks, not the rocks, but in the water themselves next to the rocks. And it's real back and forth, moving from light to dark, making sure you don't overdo one or the other, because you can imagine if you have too much light, you're going to lose a sense of depth within the water, and vice versa. You have too much dark, you lose a sense of dimension in the water. Adding a little bit of more intense green in that water, trying to get the highlight growing on that water before I add it in. Add more sparkles in, I guess. I still need to build up somewhat of a base. Looking at the rocks, trying to put a little more shadow on the shadow side there. They're ending up being a little bit too flat. And of course the light had changed, so it helped me see the shadows a little bit more. So now I have like a 2 value of light blue in those shadows of or the midtones of the ripples, and then moving back into the landmass, trying to get just some variety of strokes and a sense of brush in the grassy area on the right. And the sun's getting really bad on here, and here I start moving my shot box around until I can find a good location, and this is a good location outside the sun I can finally see again, because the way you saw it on camera is pretty much how it appeared to me painting it as well. It was just unseeable. So now the scene is facing behind me to the right, but I'm still painting, so I'm looking back and forth. But what's happening is I'm spending more time on the painting than I am looking, because I'm painting for the painting's sake, not for capturing the exactness of the scene, right? Now I'm bringing in sort of the warmer lights within that water, so this is starting to be the sparkle. It's not the absolute highlight or the absolute sparkle in the water, but it's the next step. So it's not too light that it's too bright, but it's not dark that it gets lost. And the temperature shift helps a lot as well, so now that's sun-kissed compared to the shadow-kissed areas. Well, now I bring in a violet within those blues as well. Violet is a really good shadow color within the ripples, and it helps dance with the blues, and I think it works really well with the green. Again, violet and greens, for some reason I'm very attracted to that combination. A lot more rigor work. Now a little bit lighter violet in the shadow area, so that might be my highlight on those ripples, right? There's no sun within the shadows. How do you capture the sparkle within the shadow of water? Well, I just went for a little bit lighter value of violet. And here I'm bringing those sparkles down into the sunny areas. Just touching it here and there, maybe the odd stroke within the shadow area, but not too much because it is the shadow area of the water. But you can see all the main highlights in that water is in the sunny parts of the water. And bringing some bright grasses out, little dots and dashes, and sense of light within those. Going back to the water again, it's a real dance back and forth. Working, mixing some colors to put in, moving back into the rocks, trying to get a nice highlight within those rocks themselves, give them a sense of depth. Anywhere I see a rock, I try to put it in. I shifted my values to work on the one in the shadow. Oh, and now this is the technique that did it for me. I didn't think I was able to bring it together until I put a paper towel on my finger and I wipe it off. And that's why I love white prime panels. You can wipe paint off and you get the glow of the paint on top without having to add white. It gives such a fantastic translucency. You never get this with paint. And so the top left, I wiped it off, I added a little bit of transparent orange, put it on and wipe that, and it creates a sense of warmth glow. And I do that down below on the right there. I wiped it off and added a little bit of blue to get a little sense of depth with that the blue transparency. And now I'm putting on some darker grasses, bringing it over the water, bringing it over the highlight to get a sense of depth. And without wiping the way I did there, I don't think this painting would have the same feel So I'm keep on doing my grasses. Going back into the darks, bringing some darks in there to create some deep shadows within that water to keep on giving it some more depth. And going back into the back plane there, I probably didn't think it was enough, so I did a test. I didn't like that value, so I remixed and I relayed it down. And you can see it's a little bit lighter. It doesn't compete too much with the foreground. It just gives a sense of light in the background, which again adds depth because it's behind the trees. So you can think of it as a path. Where does that lead? Kind of something to bring the person into the painting and make them look at it longer, right? And again, creating more randomness in the grasses themselves, a little more squiggles into the water. Now I sign the painting, and we'll see if this is it. Sometimes I go back. No, that's it. Beautiful brush strokes. If you like this video, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at michaelking.ca.